My name is Ivy Colton. I'm 29 years old, and 7 years ago my mother said something to me that split my life cleanly into a before and an after. She didn't whisper it, she didn't pull me aside. She didn't even lower her voice. She said it across the Thanksgiving table in front of 31 relatives, 3 guests, and a woman who would later almost become my sister-in-law. She looked directly at me, lifted her wine glass slightly as if punctuating the moment, and said, "If you had done something with your life, I wouldn't have to explain you to people." The sentence landed softly. That was the worst part. No shouting, no slammed hands, no dramatic silence, just the quiet cruelty of a statement she had rehearsed in her mind long before the turkey was carved. A few people shifted in their seats, someone coughed. My cousin pretended to adjust the salt, and then, just like that, conversation resumed, because families are experts at pretending they didn't hear the thing that made everyone uncomfortable. But here is what nobody at that table knew. While they spent 7 years erasing me, I had been building something in the silence they left behind, something large, something undeniable, and before that night was over, the truth would walk into the room without knocking. But this story doesn't start at that table. It starts much earlier, with a phone call at 2:04 in the morning and a choice that cost me everything. March 2017. I was a junior at UConn, majoring in computer science. GPA 3.7, not the top of my class, but I wasn't drifting either. I showed up. I studied until my eyes burned. I wanted that degree more fiercely than most people around me understood, because in my family, achievement wasn't celebrated, it was required. The phone rang while I was asleep. At first I thought it was part of a dream, that sharp digital vibration slicing through the dark. Then it rang again. I squinted at the screen. Mrs. Tierney, my grandmother's neighbor. No one calls at 2 a.m. with good news. I was already sitting up before I answered. "Ivy, honey, it's Ruth." Her voice trembled. She collapsed in the kitchen. The ambulance just left. Everything inside me snapped into motion. Shoes, sweatshirt, keys. I didn't even remember deciding. My body simply moved. Which hospital? St. Vincent's. I was halfway out the dorm before the call ended, but first I called my mother. The phone rang 5 times. Then, "What, Ivy?" "It's 2 in the morning, no grogginess, just irritation. Grandma had a stroke, she's at St. Vincent's." Silence, not shocked silence, not frightened silence, the kind that measures inconvenience. Then she sighed. "She's old, Ivy." "That's what happens. I have a deposition in the morning." A deposition. I stood frozen in the stairwell. "Mom, she could die. Call your sister." Click. "No, is she conscious?" "No." "Do they need us?" "Just absence." I called Meredith next. She answered faster, but the result was the same. "I can't, Ivy. Bar prep is next week. You know Mom will panic if I fall behind." "It's Grandma." "I know, but what am I supposed to do from here?" I didn't answer. Because suddenly I understood something with painful clarity. No one else was coming. 4 hours, dark highway, no music, no coffee, just the hum of tires and the sound of my own breathing. Fear does something strange to time. Every mile felt both endless and too short. I kept seeing my grandmother's hands, the ones that braided my hair every Sunday when I was little, the hands that clapped loudest at every school play, the hands that slipped me $20 bills when my parents were too busy arguing to notice I needed lunch money. When I reached St. Vincent's, dawn was still hours away. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and quiet panic. Machines blinked in soft green rhythms, and there she was, Grandma Ruth, tubes in her arms. Oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath, the left side of her body completely still. For one terrible second I didn't recognize her. The nurse stepped aside. She woke briefly. "She's been asking for you." I took her hand. It felt smaller than I remembered. Her eyes fluttered open. Focused, found me. She squeezed once. Then she leaned closer to the oxygen mask and whispered something so faint I almost missed it. One sentence, just for me. I'll tell you what she said later, because it matters more than you can imagine. But in that moment, standing beneath the fluorescent lights, I understood something with absolute certainty. If I didn't step forward, no one would. The hospital's social worker didn't sugarcoat it. 6 to 12 months of rehabilitation, she said gently. Physical therapy 3 times a week. She'll need help bathing, eating, transferring, everything. Then she slid a pamphlet toward me. Home care aides. I looked at the hourly rate. $42 an hour. I almost laughed. Grandma's Social Security barely covered rent and medication. There was no hidden savings, no backup plan, just math that didn't work. By Monday morning, I sat in Professor Donnelly's office. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said quietly, "Take a leave of absence. You've earned the right to return." The kindness in his voice nearly broke me. We signed the paperwork together. I packed my dorm into 4 boxes, drove back to Bridgeport, and called my mother. "I'm taking a leave." Grandma needs full-time care. The silence on the other end wasn't shocked, it was calculating. Then she said something that should have warned me what the next 7 years would look like. Don't tell anyone in the family. I blinked. What? I don't want people thinking we can't handle our own problems, you know how they talk. But it's the truth, her voice hardened. The truth is you're quitting. That's all they need to know. I stood in Grandma's kitchen, staring at the rented hospital bed now occupying the living room. I wanted to argue, wanted to say, I'm not quitting, I'm choosing, there's a difference. But Grandma had just come home. She needed calm, so I swallowed the words, and in that silence my mother began writing the first draft of a lie she would tell for the next 7 years. 4th of July, Aunt Linda's backyard. 20 relatives, citronella candles, kids shrieking through sprinklers. I almost didn't go, but Grandma wanted fresh air, and after 3 months of brutal therapy she deserved sunlight. We arrived late. I had been stretching her legs, the exercises that made her whisper curses under her breath. The moment we entered the yard I felt it, that subtle shift in atmosphere, the way conversations falter when you approach, the too long glances. The too quick lookaways. Aunt Linda hurried over first, she touched my arm. Honey, are you okay? Your mom told us. Across the yard my mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin while 3 aunts circled her like concerned satellites. That's not exactly what happened, I started. Ivy, please, my mother called softly. Not here, not today. Every head turned toward me, not toward her performance, toward me, the apparent problem. Grandma squeezed my wrist gently. Don't. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a lawn chair with a paper plate I never touched, watching my mother receive hugs for a tragedy she wasn't carrying. On the drive home my phone buzzed. Meredith. Mom's really upset. Why do you always make everything about yourself? I read it twice, then placed the phone in the glove compartment and drove in silence. 6 months later, Grandma was stronger, still wheelchair-bound, but fighting. Always fighting, and me, I was building something too, though no one could see it. At 2 a.m. after she slept, I took online coding courses. Python, JavaScript, database architecture, no degree, no applause, just discipline. Then a break. A tiny software company in Hartford posted an internship that didn't require a bachelor's. I applied, interviewed, the hiring manager smiled. You're exactly the kind of self-starter we need. I floated home. The offer letter arrived Thursday. I was supposed to start Monday. Friday afternoon the phone rang. Her tone had changed. Miss Colton, we received concerning information from a family member regarding your reliability. The room went cold. I'm sorry, we have to rescind the offer. I knew before she finished. I drove straight to my mother's house. She watered rosemary on the porch. Did you call my internship? No flinch. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone told them I wasn't reliable. She set down the watering can, looked at me like I was a child begging for candy. Maybe they just didn't want you. Screen door closed. Conversation over. That night Grandma watched me from her wheelchair longer than usual. I thought she was just tired. I didn't know then, someone in that house had already started collecting the truth. And one day, that truth would detonate. At 24, I lived in a studio with a radiator that clanged all night. Savings, $1,140, dropping monthly. I freelanced websites, bakeries, dentists. Landscapers, $15 an hour, sometimes $20 if they didn't argue. Grandma's blood thinners alone cost $380 a month. I paid it, never asked anyone for help, no one asked if I needed it. But the hardest part wasn't the money, it was Thanksgiving. Every year, same ritual, my mother sighing when someone asked about me, glowing when they mentioned Meredith, patting my hand and saying, "We're just glad you're here, honey," like I was a charity case she hosted out of obligation. People weren't cruel, just misinformed, because the first storyteller always wins, and my mother cried beautifully. One night, staring at a side project I'd been building for months, a logistics platform for small freight companies, something shifted inside me. It was good, not good for a dropout. Not good considering, just good. So in January 2019, at 1:07 a.m., with cold coffee beside me, I made a decision. No announcement, no speech, just a quiet vow I was going to build this for real. I filed the LLC. Named it Juniper Labs. Juniper was Grandma Ruth's middle name, and I registered under her maiden name. Ivy Parker, not to hide, to survive, because the last time I was visible, one phone call destroyed everything. I wasn't giving anyone that chance again. Grandma was the only one who knew. When I told her, she looked over her glasses and said, "About time." Then, weeks later, she handed me a check, $3,200. "Grandma, this is everything. I didn't raise you to be small," she said. "Take it." So I did. And I built the first version of Juniper in her spare bedroom on a folding chair, working 16 hours a day while the world kept believing I was nothing. And that was only the beginning. because over the next 3 years, something extraordinary started to happen. But before anyone noticed it, before the headlines, before the collision that would shatter my mother's version of me forever, there was something else waiting in the shadows. Something printed, something hidden, something that proved my failure had never been accidental, and when it surfaced, it would change everything. If you had walked past my grandmother's house in Bridgeport during those years, you would have seen nothing remarkable. A small white colonial, paint slightly weathered, wind chimes that sang whenever the Connecticut breeze pushed through the maple trees. Inside, a woman relearning how to use her left hand. And a granddaughter everyone believed had thrown her future away. What no one saw was the second life unfolding after midnight, because every night, once Grandma Ruth fell asleep, I became someone else. Not Ivy the disappointment. Not Ivy the dropout, but Ivy Parker, builder, problem solver, architect of something no one had imagined I was capable of. My first client was a trucking company in New Haven, 3 dispatchers. A cramped office that smelled permanently of diesel and burnt coffee. The owner, a broad man named Carl, stared at my laptop while I demonstrated the scheduling tool I'd built. "You're telling me this thing automatically reroutes drivers when shipments change?" "Yes, and tracks idle time." "Yes," he leaned back slowly. "Kid, this saves me 10 hours a week." 10 hours, to him, that was survival. To me, it was validation. He signed that afternoon. I drove home gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt, not from fear but from the unfamiliar weight of hope. 2 more clients followed that year, then another. I installed every system personally, trained every dispatcher myself, answered support calls at midnight. Revenue that first year, $48,000, not glamorous, not headline-worthy, but enough to keep the lights on. Enough to cover Grandma's medication. Enough to prove something inside me had been right all along. Here's something most people don't understand about freight drivers. They talk at truck stops, loading docks, coffee counters at 3 a.m. And when something saves them time, they remember who built it. I never ran ads, never hired a marketing firm. Juniper spread through conversations between people who trusted efficiency more than branding. By the end of year 2, 17 clients. 5 states and my first employee, Marcus, a developer in Philadelphia who believed in the platform almost as fiercely as I did. The day I wired his first paycheck, I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time. Because suddenly this wasn't survival anymore, it was momentum. Revenue climbed past $300,000. I moved out of the studio, 1 bedroom, nothing fancy but quiet. Grandma got a new wheelchair. One with real cushioning. When she sat in it, she sighed and said, "Well, look at us moving up in the world." I laughed, but inside something softer unfolded. For the first time in years, life didn't feel like endurance. It felt like forward motion. By the 3rd year, Juniper had 82 clients across 14 states, 6 employees, all remote. We ran supply chains for companies I had once been too intimidated to cold email. Revenue crossed $2 million, then came the call. A Boston venture capital firm, they wanted a meeting. I nearly declined, convinced they'd realize I didn't belong the moment I walked into the room. Grandma watched me pace the kitchen. "Go," she said simply. "What if they see through me?" She adjusted her glasses. To what? Competence, so I went, and 3 months later they offered a Series A investment, pre-money valuation. $12 million. I sat on the floor when I read the number, not crying, not celebrating, just stunned by the distance between the woman my family described and the woman investors now wanted to back. I signed the term sheet wearing a thrift store blazer I'd bought years earlier, kept 62% ownership, walked out of that glass tower overlooking the bay, and finally allowed myself one small, private smile. Still, I told no one, not my parents, not Meredith, not a single relative, because invisibility had once protected me, and old survival instincts don't vanish overnight. Every year I returned to the same table. And every year my mother performed the same quiet tragedy. "Still no degree," she'd murmur to whoever was listening. "Meredith just made junior partner, we're so proud." Sometimes people looked at me with sympathy. Sometimes with polite confusion. Once, memorably, someone asked what I did for work. Before I could answer, my mother said, "She does some computer thing, freelance, I think." She never looked at me when she said it. Across the table, Grandma would catch my eye and give the smallest nod. Not yet, so I stayed silent, not out of weakness, out of timing. Because power isn't just what you build, it's knowing when to reveal it. One Thanksgiving, Meredith brought her boyfriend Craig home. Tall, observant, the kind of man who noticed things others missed. After dinner, he found me alone on the back porch. "For what it's worth," he said gently, "your mom seems complicated." I almost laughed. "You okay?" he asked. No one in Meredith's orbit had ever asked me that, not once. "I will be," I said. He nodded like someone filing information away and went back inside. That moment mattered more than I realized then, because Craig was paying attention, and attentive people become witnesses. January, fluorescent lighting, dish soap aisle. I heard my name, Ivy, Uncle Rob. He hugged me long enough that I knew it wasn't obligation. "Kiddo, I've missed you." Then he said something that tilted the entire room. "Your mom told us you didn't want to hear from the family." I blinked. "She said you needed space, that reaching out would make things worse." 4 years of silence I thought meant indifference. "I never said that," I whispered. His jaw tightened. And I watched understanding dawn across his face like sunrise breaking through fog. We sat in his car for 40 minutes while I told him everything. The stroke, leaving school, the barbecue, the lies. He listened without interrupting. Then said quietly, "She controlled the story." Yes, she had. Before I stepped out, he handed me his card. "When you're ready, I'm here." A thought sparked then, brief, electric, but I kept it to myself. Timing, always timing. Months later, my mother called unexpectedly. Sweet voice, carefully measured warmth. "What if you went back to school? I could help with tuition." It was perfect. If I agreed, she'd become the heroic mother rescuing her lost daughter. If I refused, I'd be the ungrateful one rejecting help. Either way, her narrative survived. "I'm fine where I am," I told her. A pause, then her tone sharpened. "You know what people say about you, right? They pity you." My hand tightened around the phone. "What I want," I said calmly, "is for you to stop speaking for me. I speak for you because you have nothing to say." Click. For a long moment I sat there, feeling something unfamiliar. Not sadness. I had exhausted sadness years earlier. This was clarity, cold, clean, final. Then my phone buzzed, an email. Subject line, Formal Series A offer, Juniper Labs. I opened it, read it once, then again. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute certainty. I no longer needed my mother's permission to exist. From that day forward, 2 versions of me moved through the world. Ivy Colton, the family disappointment. And Ivy Parker, CEO. Every press release carried Parker, every legal filing, every contract. Grandma's name protected me in ways my own never had. TechCrunch eventually ran a small feature. The stealth startup quietly eating the logistics market. They asked for a photo, I declined. Visibility had once cost me everything. I wasn't ready to gamble with it again. Ironically, Uncle Rob mentioned Juniper in his fintech newsletter weeks later. Founder Ivy Parker is doing something interesting. He didn't recognize the name. I read the line and felt something deep settle inside me. Not triumph. Not revenge, just quiet satisfaction. 2 years before the Thanksgiving that changed everything, Grandma called me into her bedroom. A shoebox rested on her lap. Open it. Inside were photographs, birthday cards, and a single printed email. I unfolded it, and the world shifted. From Diane Colton to Paula Reynolds, Ridgeline Tech subject regarding Ivy Colton, confidential. "I'm writing out of concern for my daughter. She has a history of unreliability, and I would hate for your company to be put in a difficult position." My hands began to shake. "How long have you had this?" "Since the week it happened," Grandma said calmly. "She used my computer and forgot to sign out." "Why didn't you tell me?" She took my hand. "Because you weren't ready. You would have confronted her and she would have destroyed you. You needed to be standing on your own ground first." Her eyes searched mine. "Are you standing now?" I thought about the investors, the employees. The platform running across half the country. "Yes," I said. She squeezed my fingers. "Then you hold on to that and you wait. Wait, not hide. Wait, because truth is most powerful when revealed at exactly the right moment." I locked the email in my safe, certain I'd never need it. I was wrong. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, another email arrived from Forbes. They wanted to feature Juniper Labs in their 30 under 30 list. Publication date. I stared at the screen, didn't smile, didn't gasp, because sometimes life aligns so perfectly it almost feels scripted. My mother had spent 7 years telling 30 people I was nothing. And now, on the very day she would gather them again, the world planned to introduce them to someone else entirely. I typed my reply, "I'd be happy to participate," closed the laptop, looked out at the bare November trees, and understood something quietly electric. This time she wouldn't control the story, and as Thanksgiving approached, the table was already being set. 31 chairs, 31 expectations. 31 people prepared to see the same version of me they always had. What none of them knew was that the silence they mistook for failure had been building toward a collision, and when it arrived, it would not knock politely, it would detonate. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I stopped by Meredith's apartment to pick up a coat I'd lent her the previous winter. Nothing dramatic about the moment, just an ordinary Tuesday, gray sky, cold air that hinted at early snow. Her door was unlocked, so I stepped inside, calling her name once as I slipped off my shoes. She didn't answer, but I heard voices from the living room. Meredith and my mother, speakerphone. I froze halfway down the hallway, not intentionally eavesdropping, just caught in that awkward space where leaving would make noise, and staying meant hearing something you couldn't unhear. "I've invited the Hendersons and Uncle Frank's family this year," my mother was saying. 30 people at least. I want everything perfect when Meredith announces her engagement. A pause. "Then, and if Ivy starts anything, I need you to handle it. You know how she gets." Meredith sighed. "She doesn't get anything, Mom. She just sits there." "Exactly," my mother replied sharply. "And it makes me look bad, like I raised a zombie." The words slid through me, cold, surgical. Meredith didn't argue. She didn't defend me. She simply let the sentence exist. That silence told me everything I needed to know about the role I still played in their story. I stepped backward quietly, out the front door, never picked up the coat. Sat in my car with the engine off while my pulse settled into something slow and steady. Not anger, not hurt, something far more dangerous. Resolution. Then my phone buzzed, another email from Forbes confirming the publication date. Thanksgiving morning. I stared at the message for a long moment and understood something with crystalline clarity. The collision was no longer hypothetical. It was scheduled. 7:15 a.m. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. Gray sweater, jeans, boots, pearl studs Grandma had given me on my 21st birthday. I looked exactly as I always had at family gatherings, unremarkable, intentionally so. No armor, no announcement, just quiet. I picked Grandma up at 8. She was already waiting by the door, a tin of homemade shortbread balanced on her lap. "You look nice," she said. "I look the same as always." "Exactly," she replied, eyes twinkling like she knew something the rest of the world didn't. The drive to my parents' colonial on Maple Ridge took an hour. Cars lined the street, at least a dozen. Inside, warmth spilled through the open doorway along with the scent of turkey and rosemary. The house hummed with voices. Motown played softly in the background, my mother's annual attempt to seem effortless. She stood near the kitchen archway when we entered, burgundy dress, pearls, hair perfectly set, holding court like she always did. She saw me, smiled. But the smile never reached her eyes. "Oh, Ivy, you brought Mother, how nice." Then, without missing a beat, she turned back to Aunt Linda. "Ivy still lives near her. It gives her something to do, something to do." I helped Grandma settle at the table. Uncle Rob caught my eye from across the room and nodded warmly. My father squeezed my shoulder in passing. "Hey, kiddo," then drifted away back into his lifelong habit of avoiding whatever required courage. And as I looked around that living room, I realized something strange. In less than 2 hours, every single one of these people would see me differently. They just didn't know it yet. Dinner began at 4 sharp. 31 people arranged around a long table, 3 smaller ones hidden beneath a linen cloth my mother had ironed that morning. I know because she told 4 separate people. She stood, lifted her glass. The room quieted instantly. "I want to thank everyone for being here. This year is especially meaningful." She turned toward Meredith, glowing. "Meredith and Craig are engaged." Applause filled the room. Craig smiled modestly. Meredith held up her hand, the diamond catching chandelier light like it had been rehearsed. "Junior partner at 31, my mother continued proudly. "Now a beautiful engagement. Everything a mother dreams of." She let the words settle, then slowly, deliberately, her gaze traveled down the table until it reached me. "And Ivy," she said gently, tilting her head with sculpted pity, "we're just grateful you're here. We keep hoping next year will be your year." A few sympathetic smiles appeared. Someone looked down at their plate. Mrs. Henderson, Craig's grandmother, leaned toward me. "What do you do, Ivy?" I inhaled to answer. But my mother was faster. "Ivy is still figuring things out. She left college a few years ago." Lower voice now, discreet but perfectly audible. "It's been a journey." Meredith added without looking up, "She's good with computers, though. She fixed my printer once." Polite laughter rippled down the table. I set my fork down, said nothing, because across from me, Grandma gave the smallest nod. Not yet. After dinner, people drifted into the living room for coffee and pie. Second act energy, looser, more conversational. I stood near the bookshelf holding untouched tea when I heard my mother again, this time speaking quietly to Mrs. Henderson. "Between you and me, I sometimes wonder if Ivy dropped out because of mental health issues." My fingers tightened around the cup. "We've tried to help," she continued softly. "She refuses." I set the tea down, walked toward her. Every person nearby tracked the movement. "Mom, I need you to stop." She looked up, startled or performing startled. "Ivy, you were telling a stranger I have mental health issues. I just worry about you." That familiar glisten appeared in her eyes, the prelude to tears. From the corner my father murmured, "Deanne maybe, Kevin don't," she snapped quietly. Then she looked back at me and the mask slipped, just slightly, just long enough. "If you had done something with your life, I wouldn't have to explain you to people." The sentence struck the room like a bell, clear, resonant, impossible to ignore. Tommy looked at his wife. Aunt Linda covered her mouth. Craig stared at the floor. And from the far end of the room, Grandma spoke. 2 words, steady as stone, "That's enough." Then a phone vibrated. Uncle Rob glanced down at his screen, stopped breathing, read it again. Color drained from his face, then rushed back. "Ivy," he whispered. The room was already silent enough that the single word traveled like a gunshot. He looked at me, then at his phone again. "Is this you?" Uncle Frank leaned forward. "What is it, Rob?" Rob turned the phone around. Frank read, his eyebrows climbed. "Good Lord." Aunt Linda was already searching on her own phone. 3 seconds, 5. "Oh my God." She turned the screen outward, and suddenly, my face was in the room, professional portrait, direct gaze, headline glowing beneath it. Someone whispered, 47 million. One by one, heads turned from their phones to me. Tommy, Craig, Mrs. Henderson, Meredith, 31 people. My mother stood in the center, still unaware, scanning faces like a captain realizing too late that the ship was tilting. "What is everyone looking at?" she demanded. No one answered. Meredith took Craig's phone. "Read." Her hand fell into her lap, set the phone face down, stared at the carpet. My mother was the last to know. My father walked over quietly, held out his phone. She took it, and I watched her move through 3 unmistakable stages: confusion, shock, fear. "This isn't real," she whispered. Rob stood slowly. "It's on Forbes, Diane, and TechCrunch. It's very real." Her eyes lifted toward me. "You built a company worth $47 million. Yes, and you didn't tell us." Even now, standing inside the wreckage of her own narrative, she made it about what she hadn't been given. "You never asked what I was building," I said calmly. "You only ever told people what I wasn't." The silence deepened until I could hear ice shifting inside someone's glass. Mrs. Henderson spoke quietly. "You told me she had mental health issues 10 minutes ago." My mother went pale. "I didn't mean, I think you meant exactly that." Understanding spread through the room like a slow wave, not just that I'd succeeded, but that for 7 years my mother had rewritten me and they had believed her. Then Grandma spoke again, clear, absolute. "Ivy left school to take care of me. I had a stroke." She looked directly at my mother. "You refused to help your own mother. She was 22. She drove 4 hours in the middle of the night alone. No one breathed. You told everyone she was lazy because you were ashamed." "Mother, not of her," Grandma said evenly. "Of yourself." Aunt Linda turned toward my mother. "Deanne, is that true?" No answer came, and then for the first time in 7 years my father spoke. "It's true." 2 words from a man who had lived as furniture inside every conflict. But they detonated anyway. My mother tried to recover, shoulders straightening, chin lifting. I should have been more supportive, but I never hurt her. 4 words left my mouth before I even felt them forming. "You called my internship." The room froze again. I opened my phone, displayed the email, handed it to Rob. He read aloud. When he finished, he set the phone down slowly. "You sabotaged your own daughter." "I was protecting her." "From succeeding?" he asked quietly. Craig stepped back from Meredith, just 1 step, but it said everything. My mother looked around the room searching for an ally. There were none. Then she sank into the sofa and cried, not the polished tears, the real ones, the sound of a stage collapsing beneath its lead actor. "I did everything for this family so people wouldn't look down on us." Grandma's voice answered like a hymn. "They're not looking down on us because of Ivy, Deanne. They're looking down on us because of you." I had imagined this moment once, thought I'd feel triumph, vindication, relief. Instead, I felt tired. "I didn't plan this," I said quietly. "I didn't come here to humiliate you, but I won't control the truth anymore, not for you." She looked suddenly smaller than I had ever seen her. I walked to Grandma, unlocked her chair, pushed her toward the front door. Past 30 silent people, the November air struck my face, cold and clean. For a moment I thought it was over. I was wrong, because the next morning my phone rang, and it was Meredith, Black Friday morning, 8:47. The hotel room was quiet except for the low hum of the heater clicking on and off. Grandma slept in the second bed, blankets pulled to her chin, one hand resting outside them like a child who had fallen asleep mid-story. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. "Meredith." I stared at it for 2 rings, 3, then answered. Her voice was stripped bare, no polish, no social armor, no big sister composure. She sounded like someone who had been awake all night staring at a ceiling she no longer recognized. "I need to tell you something." I didn't speak. I knew about the internship call. The words landed softly, but they hit harder than anything my mother had said the night before. The heater clicked off. The silence that followed felt enormous. "Mom told me she handled it," Meredith continued, voice trembling. "She said you weren't ready for a real job, that it would overwhelm you." You knew for 5 years? I asked quietly. Yes, no excuse attached, no justification, just the truth, raw and late. And you said nothing, a shaky breath, because if I questioned her, I'd become you. I closed my eyes, not from shock, from understanding. So you let me be the sacrifice? Yes, the word cracked in the middle. I'm not calling to ask you to forgive me, she said. I'm calling because you deserve to know that I know what I did and I hate it. 7 years of dinners sat between us. 7 years of printer jokes, of polite smiles, of silence mistaken for agreement. I don't know what to do with your apology right now, I told her honestly, but I hear it. Another pause, then she said something unexpected. Craig told me something last night. What? He said, your family needs professional help, Meredith. I love you, but I'm not marrying into something this broken unless we face it. I thought about Craig standing quietly near the mantel, watching everything without theatrics. He had been paying attention far longer than I realized. I think he's right, Meredith whispered. So do I. Neither of us said goodbye. She hung up first, and strangely that felt appropriate. Some conversations don't end. They just settle. That afternoon I drove back to my parents' house. Not for reconciliation, not for another confrontation, just for Grandma's overnight bag and the tin of shortbread we'd forgotten on the counter. The house looked smaller somehow, like the events of yesterday had shrunk it. Thanksgiving decorations still clung to the walls, but the warmth was gone. It smelled faintly of cold gravy and regret. My mother sat at the kitchen table. No makeup, hair undone, wearing an old Yukon sweatshirt I'd never seen before, the kind she would have once considered unacceptable for anyone to witness. My father sat beside her, coffee untouched. Ivy, can we talk? She asked. I stayed in the doorway. I'm listening. She pressed her palms against the table, steadying herself. I made mistakes, I know that, but you have to understand I grew up with nothing. People looked down on our family. I just wanted us to look right, and I wasn't right enough. Her eyes lifted slowly. I didn't mean, Mom, I said gently. I'm not here to fight you, but I need to be clear. She waited, so did my father. I'm not coming back to that table, not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not at any gathering. The words didn't echo, they settled. Until you do 3 things. Her lips tightened. What 3 things? First, you tell every person who sat at that table the real reason I left school, not your version, the truth. She flinched. Second, delete the family group chat. Let people reach out to me directly. No more gatekeeping. Her jaw set. Third, start therapy, not for me, for you. Silence, long enough to hear the refrigerator hum. And if I don't, she asked, then this is the last real conversation we have. That will be your choice, not mine. For the first time in my life, my boundary did not tremble, it stood. I turned to my father. I wrote you a letter 4 years ago. You never answered. Why? He stared at the table for several seconds before speaking. I didn't know what to say. That was all. No defense, no excuse, just the fragile truth of a man who had chosen the easier silence. Oddly, it was enough. I picked up Grandma's bag, the shortbread tin, walked to the door. Grandma waited in the car. When I slid into the driver's seat, she studied my face for a moment, then squeezed my hand. You did good, baby. Now drive. Snow had started to fall. Light, almost decorative. The radio murmured retail statistics, Black Friday numbers climbing somewhere far away from our small human earthquake. Grandma reached over and turned the volume down. You never told them what I said to you in the hospital. No, I replied softly. That was ours. Can I say it again? I nodded. She looked straight ahead through the windshield. They will try to make you small. Don't let them, but don't become them either. My eyes burned. The road blurred, then cleared. For 7 years I had tried to live inside that sentence. Build, but don't bulldoze. Win, but don't gloat. Stand tall, but never on someone else's shoulders. You did more than okay, Grandma murmured, settling back beneath her blanket. You did it clean. And for the first time in years I laughed, not the polite laugh you give at dinner tables. A real one, deep, unexpected, like finding fresh air in a room you thought had none. I drove us home through silver snowfall, and the quiet no longer felt like erasure. It felt like peace. Within 2 weeks, the fallout became visible. Uncle Rob published an essay on his blog, When Families Silence the Wrong Person. No names, no details, but everyone who needed to recognize it did. It was shared over 6,000 times. 3 strangers emailed him saying it made them cry. Aunt Linda called me directly the first time in 4 years. I'm hosting Christmas, she said simply. Your mother won't be. No cruelty in her voice, just finality. Uncle Frank left a voicemail, gruff, short. I should have asked more questions. I didn't. I'm sorry. Tommy called too, crying openly. I believed her for 7 years. I should have seen it. I told each of them the same thing. You believed what you were told. I don't blame you for that. Then came the email from my mother, 4 sentences, no decoration, no performance. I understand your conditions. I'm not ready for all of them, but I've scheduled a therapy appointment. That's what I can do right now. I read it twice. Saved it. Later I learned what pushed her, not me, not Rob's essay. Margaret Henderson, Craig's grandmother. She had pulled my mother aside that night and said calmly, I raised 3 children, never once sabotaged one of them. You need help, Diane, real help. Judgment from a peer, from a woman she respected. That was the blade that cut through. Craig held firm. No wedding, he told Meredith, until this family faces itself. And Meredith agreed. She started therapy 2 weeks later. A week before Christmas, a handwritten letter arrived, cream stationery, real stamp. Meredith, 4 pages. She wrote about growing up as the good one, the pressure to perform, perfect grades, perfect resume, perfect daughter, and the fear beneath it all that one mistake would exile her into my role. I performed for Mom my entire life, she wrote, and I don't know who I am without her applause. Then this, I used you as a shield, Ivy. I let her diminish you so she wouldn't diminish me. I read that line 3 times. She ended with, I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm asking you to know that I finally see it and I'm not okay with who I've been. I texted back, I need time, but I'm not closing the door. Her reply came instantly. That's enough. For the first time we were honest, and honesty is where healing begins. The Apex acquisition closed in January, $47 million. I signed the documents in a San Francisco conference room overlooking the Bay Bridge, the same view I'd stared at years earlier when Juniper was just a fragile dream. I stayed on as VP of product, relocated to Boston, found a quiet 2-bedroom apartment with good light. Grandma moved with me. I hired a full-time home aide. Her new room overlooked a small garden where she watched birds every morning with her Earl Grey. This is nicer than the house I raised your mother in, she said once. Ironic. I started therapy too, not because I was broken. Because silence leaves marks, the kind that surface at 3 a.m. when memory replays every dinner table where you were made smaller. Uncle Rob visited monthly with terrible jokes and takeout. Once I told him he'd been the closest thing I had to a father. He went very quiet, then said softly, that means more than you know, kiddo. People often ask, have you forgiven them? As if forgiveness were a switch, on or off. It isn't. Some days I understand my mother, a woman shaped by poverty and judgment who built her identity on appearances. Other days I see a mother tell her daughter, I'm proud of you in a grocery aisle, and I have to leave my cart behind. Both truths live inside me. My mother completed 4 therapy sessions by Christmas. She corrected the story with 3 relatives, not all, but she started. My father wrote me a letter too, 1 page, no excuses. I was afraid of your mother and I chose her silence over yours. That is my failure. I haven't written back yet, but I kept it. Love without boundaries is just a door without a lock. Anyone can walk in, take what they want, call it family while they do. I don't hate my mother, I hate what she did. And I'm learning, slowly, to separate the two, but I will never sit again at a table where my name is spoken with pity. My boundaries are not punishment, they are architecture, the shape of a life I can survive inside. If any part of this feels familiar, a parent rewriting your story, a sibling in the spotlight, a family casting you as the cautionary tale, hear this: you don't need to build a $47 million company to prove your worth. Your worth is that you kept going when no one clapped. Spring arrived quietly in Boston, not with some cinematic burst of warmth, but gradually. Snow receded into gray piles, sidewalk cafes returned, people lingered outside again. And for the first time in my adult life, I understood what calm actually felt like, not the fragile calm that depends on everyone behaving. The real kind, the kind you build, the kind no one can revoke. Grandma loved the new apartment immediately. Every morning she sat by the window with her tea, watching joggers pass like it was a live television show. Look at that one, she'd whisper. Running like someone's chasing him. Some afternoons I would find her asleep in the chair, sunlight pooling across her blanket. Those were the moments I realized something unexpected. For years I had been surviving. Now I was living. In early May I decided to host dinner. Not a corporate dinner, not a networking event, just a table. Mine, I chose a Saturday evening, sent 5 invitations. Uncle Rob, Aunt Linda, Tommy, Meredith, my parents. No conditions in the message, just a date and time. I didn't follow up. Whoever came, came. Whoever didn't, that would be its own answer. Grandma watched me cook all afternoon, occasionally offering commentary that I absolutely did not ask for. You're oversalting the pasta water. You need softer lighting. No one remembers a meal with harsh lighting. By 6 o'clock the apartment smelled like rosemary and garlic, candles flickered, music hummed softly from the speakers. And I realized something as I set the table. For the first time, no seat carried tension. No chair represented obligation. Every place setting meant the same thing: welcome if you can come with honesty. 6:02 p.m. Uncle Rob. Of course, holding 2 bottles of wine and wearing the exact same corduroy jacket he'd owned since I was 12. He stepped inside, looked around slowly, then pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. "You built this?" he said quietly. "Yes," he nodded once, proud in a way that didn't need applause. 6:11. Aunt Linda and Tommy arrived together, arguing about parking like they always had. The normalcy of it made something warm spread through my chest. 6:19. The bell rang again. Meredith stood there, no designer coat, no curated perfection, just jeans, hair pulled back, eyes uncertain. For the first time in my life, my older sister looked nervous around me. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We hugged, tentative but real. Then 6:27, the final knock. I knew before opening the door. Parents have a way of announcing themselves even through silence. My father stood slightly behind my mother, older than I remembered, smaller somehow. My mother clutched a bakery box like it might shield her. "We weren't sure if we should come," she admitted. "You were invited." That was all. No performance greeting, no dramatic reconciliation, just space. They stepped inside, and something subtle shifted in the air, not tension, not comfort. Something new, neutral ground. Conversations started cautiously, like people testing ice, but slowly stories replaced politeness. Tommy described his new job. Linda complained about airline seats. Rob told a joke so terrible Grandma threatened to disown him. Even Meredith laughed. At one point I caught my mother watching me, not evaluating, not comparing, just watching, as if seeing me clearly required relearning how. Halfway through dinner she set down her fork. "I want to say something." The table quieted. She looked directly at me. I was wrong. No theatrics, no trembling speech, just 4 simple words. I confused control with care. "And image with love." No one interrupted. She continued. "I've spent months in therapy trying to understand why I needed everything to look perfect, even if it meant breaking you. There is no excuse for what I did." Her voice wavered but didn't collapse. "I am proud of you, Ivy, not because you succeeded, because you stayed kind after we weren't." The words entered me slowly, like warmth returning to numb hands. I didn't cry, but something inside me unclenched. My father cleared his throat. "I failed you too," he said quietly. "I thought keeping peace meant staying silent. It didn't. It meant abandoning you." Silence followed, but it wasn't heavy. It was respectful. Meredith spoke next. "I'm still learning who I am without Mom's approval," she admitted, "but I want a relationship with you that isn't built on comparison." I studied each of them, not the roles they'd played. The people sitting in front of me now. Then I said the only honest thing. "I don't expect perfection anymore, just truth." Grandma raised her glass. "Well," she declared, "this is the healthiest family dinner I've ever survived." Everyone laughed. Even my mother. Later that night, after dishes were stacked and leftovers packed, my parents lingered near the door. My mother hesitated before speaking. "Would you consider visiting sometime?" I met her eyes. "Yes. But it won't be the old dynamic." She nodded immediately. "I know," and for once I believed her. My father hugged me, awkward but sincere. Then they left. No drama, no emotional collapse, just the quiet beginning of something repaired. Not restored, rebuilt. There is a difference. Near midnight I found Grandma folding napkins at the counter. "You don't have to do that," I laughed. "I like finishing things properly," she replied. Then she studied me with that sharp, knowing gaze. "You see what you did tonight? I hosted dinner," she smiled. "You changed the gravity. Families orbit whoever holds the center. Tonight that was you." I leaned against the counter. For years I thought being strong meant enduring. Turns out it meant deciding. Grandma squeezed my hand. "You stopped fighting for a seat and built your own table. That's the bravest thing a person can do." A year passed, quietly, beautifully. Meredith and Craig married in a small ceremony. No spectacle, just sincerity. She asked me to stand beside her. I did. My mother still attended therapy. Sometimes she slipped into old habits, but now she caught herself and corrected it. My father called once a month, never forcing conversation, just showing up consistently. Grandma turned 88. We celebrated in the apartment with too much cake and terrible singing. At one point she leaned toward me and whispered, "You broke the pattern. Do you understand how rare that is?" I did, because patterns don't shatter loudly. They dissolve through choices made again and again. People think strength is confrontation. Sometimes it is. But more often strength is restraint. It is refusing to become the cruelty that shaped you. It is building warmth where you were given cold. It is saying, "The story changes with me. I no longer measure love by sacrifice or approval. Or endurance. Love, real love, makes room for your full voice. Anything smaller isn't love, it's management. If you see yourself anywhere in my story, maybe you were the overlooked child, the family disappointment. The quiet achiever no one noticed, the one who learned early not to need too much. Listen carefully. You do not have to keep auditioning for belonging. You are allowed to outgrow the roles they assigned you. You are allowed to build new rooms, new tables, new traditions. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking for permission. I used to believe success would finally make my family see me. But success wasn't the turning point. Self-respect was. The moment I stopped shrinking, everything else rearranged itself. So if you take one thing from my story, let it be this. You don't have to destroy your family to change your life, but you do have to stop destroying yourself to keep them comfortable. Build the table, light it warmly, and let only those who come with honesty sit down, the rest. Wish them well and keep eating. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this story. If it spoke to you, even a little, I'd love to hear what part stayed with you. And if you're walking through something similar right now, know this. Breaking cycles doesn't make you disloyal, it makes you brave. I'll see you in the next story.